Welcome to our deep dive into the fascinating world of housing finance. We've got a stack of academic papers, our articles from financial websites, even some Khan Academy videos to unpack.
That's a lot of material.
It is. It is. But it's going to be fun. We're going to try to make it fun.
Absolutely.
So one of the things that I learned is that a mortgage can actually be viewed as owning a long call option on your house.
Oh, yeah.
Does that sound complicated?
It sounds a lot more complicated than it is.
Yeah.
But we'll make sure it makes sense.
We will definitely make it make sense by the end of this. You'll have a solid grasp of how housing gets financed from like individual decisions like renting versus buying all the way to complex financial instruments like REITs.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
There's a lot to uncover when we talk about housing finance.
Okay, so to kick things off, let's go back to basics for a minute.
Okay.
Remember the balance sheet. Assets equal liabilities plus equity.
Oh, yeah. The fundamental accounting equation.
Exactly.
It's not just for accounting class, though.
No.
It's the bedrock of understanding any financial decision, including housing.
Including housing, your house, your car, your savings.
Right.
Those are all assets. And then your mortgage, student loans, credit card debt, liabilities.
Liabilities.
And the difference,
That's your equity.
your equity. That's like a snapshot of your financial health.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
And one of the key concepts that's connected to the balance sheet is leverage.
Leverage, okay.
Leverage is essentially using borrowed money to amplify your returns.
So like a mortgage.
Like a mortgage, exactly.
Okay.
And so this is where the equity multiplier comes in.
Okay, so leverage sounds powerful, but also maybe a little bit like gambling.
It definitely can be. So imagine you buy a house for $500,000, you put down $100,000 of your own money, and you borrow the remaining $400,000 as a mortgage.
Okay.
So that means your equity multiplier is 5.
5.
Because you control a $500,000 asset with only $100,000 of your own money.
I see. Okay.
So the higher the equity multiplier,
Yeah.
the more leverage you're using,
Okay.
which means
More risk.
more risk if the housing market takes a downturn.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So let's bring this back to mortgages
Okay.
and that intriguing idea of a long call option.
Okay.
So remember, with a long call option,
Yeah.
you have the right but not the obligation to buy something
Right.
at a specific price.
Okay, but I need help with this.
Yeah.
How is a mortgage like having an option?
So imagine the purchase price of your house,
Yeah.
which is that $500,000 in our example.
Yeah.
That's like the strike price of an option.
Okay.
If the value of your house increases, say, to $600,000,
Yeah.
you essentially have the option to exercise your right and sell the house, making a nice profit.
Okay.
But if the market drops
Yeah.
and your house is only worth $450,000,
Yeah.
you can choose to walk away
All right.
and let the bank take the house,
Right.
limiting your loss to your initial $100,000 down payment.
Wow, I never thought of it that way.
Yeah.
So you're kind of only risking your initial investment, like the premium. You pay for an option. It makes you wonder though, like when do people actually decide to walk away?
Yeah. That's a great question. And that actually leads us to the concept of mortgage default.
Mortgage default.
Mortgage default. So one model
Okay.
is called the frictionless option model.
Okay.
And this model suggests that borrowers will strategically default if their house value falls below their outstanding mortgage balance.
So if the house is worth less than what they owe,
Exactly.
they just cut their losses and give it back to the bank.
Yeah. It's like cutting their losses
Yeah.
and handing the keys back to the bank.
Which makes sense
It does.
from a pure financial perspective.
From a purely financial perspective.
Yeah.
But there's another model.
Oh, there is.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
It's called the double trigger model.
Double trigger.
Double trigger model. And this suggests that borrowers are more likely to default when they experience both negative equity
Okay.
and
Yeah.
some other financial stressor.
So like a job loss or something.
Like a job loss, a medical emergency.
Yeah.
So it's not just about the numbers.
Right. It's about like real life situations hitting.
Real life hitting hard.
Yeah.
And these different default models are actually important
Okay.
because they help us understand the risks associated with mortgage-backed securities,
Which are?
which are bundles of mortgages that investors can buy.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this all makes me think more carefully about those should I rent or buy debates.
Oh, yeah. It's a classic dilemma.
It is.
And there's no one-size-fits-all answer.
Right.
Like factors like your financial situation,
Yeah.
your risk tolerance,
Mm-hmm.
even where you see yourself in 5 years.
Right. All those things factor in.
Yeah.
You also have to consider things like property taxes,
Yeah.
maintenance costs, the potential for your home to appreciate or depreciate.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's not as simple as just comparing like your monthly rent payment to your mortgage payment.
It's not a simple calculation.
Yeah, and you can't forget about the roles of developers and landlords in the housing market. They're the ones who are ultimately providing the housing, whether it's for rent or for sale.
Exactly. They're key players.
Yeah. It's interesting to think about their different incentives, though,
Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Like a landlord profits from owning properties,
Right.
while a developer profits from creating new ones.
Yeah. It's different perspectives.
Different perspectives.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder who benefits most from a limited housing supply and rising real estate prices.
Right. It's a complex ecosystem.
It is.
And the interplay between those incentives can have a big impact on housing affordability.
It can. Speaking of developers, I've always wondered how they actually finance those big construction projects.
Mm-hmm.
It can't just be mortgages, right?
Definitely not.
Hmm.
Building houses is a capital-intensive process, and developers have to get creative with their financing.
Okay.
So they can use bonds,
Bonds.
which are essentially loans from investors,
Okay.
or they can obtain bank loan,
Uh-huh.
which is more traditional debt financing.
So it's similar to us getting a mortgage just on a much larger scale.
Exactly, just on a much grander scale.
Grander scale.
Yeah. But developers can also tap into the equity markets
Okay.
by issuing stock and becoming publicly traded companies.
So you're telling me a real estate developer could be listed on the stock exchange?
Absolutely.
Wow. Okay.
And then there are real estate investment trusts, or REITs.
REITs.
REITs, which pool money from investors to buy and manage income-producing real estate.
Yeah, I've heard of REITs. They seem to be everywhere these days.
They've become major players,
Yeah.
especially after the 2008 financial crisis.
Mm-hmm. Okay. More on that later.
More that later.
Okay, I'm definitely intrigued. But before we dive into REITs, let's zoom out for a moment and consider some of the global challenges in housing finance.
Okay.
So take Africa, for example.
Mm-hmm.
That paper by Ba et al. Really opened my eyes to how different the landscape is there.
It's a really insightful paper.
It is.
Yeah, traditional mortgage markets are often underdeveloped in many parts of Africa.
Really?
Yeah, due to factors like limited access to formal financial institutions.
Oh, I see.
Lack of clear property rights.
Oh, wow.
It's a stark contrast to what we see in developed economies.
It is. It makes you realize that housing finance solutions need to be tailored to the specific challenges of each region.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Speaking of tailored solutions, that paper also mentions some incredibly innovative approaches,
Oh, yeah.
like housing microfinance and contractual savings for housing.
It's fascinating, isn't it?
Yeah.
They're finding ways to address those specific challenges
Yeah.
and expand access to housing for people who might not qualify for a traditional mortgage.
It's really inspiring to see how they're adapting and innovating.
Yeah.
But now I'm ready to delve deeper into those REITs. They're clearly a force to be reckoned with in the world of housing finance.
They are. And their rise is closely tied to the concept of financialization.
Financialization.
Which is essentially the growing influence of financial markets and motives in areas like housing.
So it's like housing is becoming more about financial investment than just providing shelter.
That's one way to look at it. And it raises important questions
It does.
about affordability access and the long-term stability of the housing market.
Definitely some food for thought. But first, I think we need a clearer picture of what REITs and REOCs actually are and how they operate.
You're right. Let's break them down.
Okay.
REITs, or real estate investment trusts,
Mm-hmm.
are companies that own and operate income-producing real estate,
Yeah.
like apartment buildings, shopping malls,
Okay.
office complexes,
Exactly.
and then REOCs, or real estate operating companies,
Yeah.
are very similar.
So they both own and manage properties.
They do.
What's the main difference?
The key distinction lies in their tax structure and how they distribute profits.
Okay.
So REITs have to distribute at least 90% of their taxable income to shareholders.
Wow.
90% as dividends.
Okay.
REC don't have that same requirement.
So there's a potential tax advantage to investing in REITs.
That's right.
Got it. And because REITs are publicly traded, they're subject to more stringent regulatory oversight. Okay. So it sounds like there's some compelling reasons why REITs have become so popular.
Yeah.
But how do they actually make money? It can't just be collecting rent, can it?
It's more than just rent collection.
Uh,
REITs generate income from rent payments, of course,
Yeah.
but they can also profit from property appreciation,
Okay.
development projects,
Uh-huh.
and even providing financing to other real estate ventures.
So they have multiple avenues for generating returns.
They do.
But I imagine investing in REITs comes with its own set of risks, too.
Of course. The value of real estate can fluctuate,
Yeah.
interest rates can rise,
Right.
and economic downturns can impact rental income and property values.
Right.
REITs aren't immune to these market forces.
So it's important to understand those risks
Uh,
before jumping into REIT investing.
Absolutely.
Speaking of investing, I'm curious to learn more about how investors actually pick stocks,
Okay.
whether it's REITs or any other type of company.
Yeah, that's a great question.
Yeah.
And it's more relevant to housing finance than you might think. Okay. So there are 4 main approaches to stock picking,
4.
each with its own set of principles and techniques.
Okay.
So we have fundamental analysis,
Okay.
technical analysis, behavioral analysis,
Okay.
and sentiment analysis.
Wow. 4 different approaches.
Oh,
Tell me more about each one.
okay. Let's start with fundamental analysis,
Okay.
which focuses on evaluating a company's intrinsic value
Intrinsic value.
by examining its financial statements,
Okay.
management team, industry dynamics,
Mhm.
and the overall economic environment.
So it's like digging into the nuts and bolts of the business.
Exactly.
Okay.
Then there's technical analysis,
Technical analysis.
which is all about analyzing historical price and volume data
Okay.
to identify patterns and trends that might predict future price movements.
So more about charts and graphs than balance sheets?
Precisely. Technical analysts believe that past price action can provide valuable insights into future market behavior.
Okay. I'm starting to see the difference.
Yeah.
What about behavioral analysis? That sounds intriguing.
Yeah. So behavioral analysis takes into account the psychological factors that can influence market participants' decisions,
Okay.
recognizing that investors don't always act rationally.
Right.
So it's about understanding those emotional drivers,
Yeah.
like fear and greed,
Yeah.
that can sometimes lead to irrational market bubbles or crashes.
Right. Yeah.
Behavioral analysts believe that recognizing these psychological biases can help predict how the market might react to certain events or news.
Okay. That makes sense. And lastly, we have sentiment analysis. What's that all about?
So sentiment analysis leverages the power of natural language processing and machine learning to analyze news articles, social media posts, and other textual data to gauge the overall mood of the market towards a particular stock or sector.
So it's like trying to read the collective mind of the market
You got it.
by analyzing like the words people are using.
Exactly. Sentiment analysts believe that shifts in market sentiment can be a leading indicator of future price changes.
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, I think I'm starting to grasp these different approaches.
Yeah.
But can you give me a concrete example?
Yeah. Well, let's use McDonald's as a case study.
McDonald's.
Or MACD, as it's known on the stock market.
MACD.
Yeah.
Love their fries.
Yeah.
But tell me, how would these different analysts approach their stock?
So a fundamental analyst might examine McDonald's financial statements,
Okay.
noting that their operating margin has been steadily improving. Sales have remained resilient even during economic uncertainty.
Okay.
So they might conclude that the stock is undervalued
Okay.
based on its solid fundamentals.
So it's all about those core financial metrics.
Exactly.
What about a technical analyst?
A technical analyst might notice that MACD's price has been forming a cup and handle pattern.
A cup and handle.
A cup and handle pattern,
Okay.
which is a bullish signal.
Bullish signal.
This might lead them to believe that the stock is poised for a breakout to the upside.
Interesting. So they're looking for like visual clues.
Visual clues?
In the charts.
In the charts.
Okay. What about the behavioral analyst?
A behavioral analyst might observe that McDonald's is expertly leveraging consumer psychology.
How so?
By introducing limited time offers and menu innovations
Oh, yeah.
that create a sense of urgency and excitement,
Right.
driving sales and customer loyalty.
So they're analyzing how McDonald's marketing strategies tap into our desires
Exactly.
and our habits.
It's in our habits.
Okay. And finally, what about the sentiment analyst? What would they see?
A sentiment analyst might analyze social media posts and news articles about McDonald's
Okay.
and find a surge in positive mentions related to their new plant-based burger offerings.
Oh, interesting.
They might conclude that this positive buzz
Yep.
indicates growing consumer acceptance of their sustainability efforts, which could boost the company's image
Right.
and potentially its stock price.
Wow, that's a great illustration of how each approach offers a unique lens for evaluating a company.
Yep.
It really is.
Yeah.
It underscores that there's no one-size-fits-all approach to stock picking.
There isn't.
Yeah. It's often about combining different perspectives
Right.
to gain a more holistic understanding.
Exactly.
Okay, my head is spinning a little bit after all that. We've covered a lot of ground today, from balance sheets to mortgage options, from global housing challenges to the intricacies of stock picking.
We have. It's a testament to the vast scope of housing finance.
It is. But I feel like we've only just scratched the
I
surface.
have. But that's what deep dives are all about.
That's what deep dives are all about.
Yeah. We'll take a short break here.
Okay.
And in the next part,
Yeah.
we'll delve even deeper into the financialization of housing
Okay.
and what it means for everyday people.
Sounds good. See you in part 2. Welcome back to our deep dive into housing finance. It's incredible how much ground we've covered already, from personal finances to global trends, even dipping our toes into stock picking strategies.
We really have explored a lot of facets.
We have. But I think it's time to tackle one of the biggest elephants in the room: the financialization of housing.
Yeah, it's been looming over us this whole time.
It has. We keep circling back to it, but haven't really unpacked what it means for everyday people.
Right.
I mean, what does it even look like in real life?
Well, think about how companies are buying up tons of homes, not for families to live in,
Yeah.
but to rent them out sometimes, driving up prices in entire neighborhoods.
Okay.
That's financialization in action.
So it's not just about, like, individual decisions anymore.
Right.
It's about how big players are shaping the whole housing market.
Exactly.
But how did we even get here?
Well, it's been a gradual process.
Okay.
Driven by a confluence of factors.
Okay.
One is the deregulation of financial markets,
Okay.
which started back in the 1980s.
Okay.
This opened the floodgates for new and complex financial products
Yeah.
tied to housing, like mortgage-backed securities.
So more money flowing into the housing market, attracted by the potential for big returns, which, as we've seen, can also bring bigger risks.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And as housing prices rose, it became more and more attractive for financial institutions to jump into the game.
I see.
That led to even more complex financial engineering and investment strategies focused on housing.
It's almost like a feedback loop.
Yeah,
Higher prices attract more investors, who then drive prices even higher.
that's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
And then there's globalization.
Globalization.
Capital can now zip around the world in search of the best returns.
Okay.
And real estate, especially in major cities, has become a global asset.
So it's not just local factors influencing prices anymore.
Right.
It's international money flowing into the market.
Precisely.
Okay.
And on top of all that, there's the constant search for yield.
Yield.
As returns from traditional investments like bonds have dwindled in recent years,
Yeah.
investors have been hungry for alternatives.
Right.
And you guessed it, housing often looks pretty tasty to them.
It makes sense.
Yeah.
But this all sounds pretty abstract. What are the real-world consequences of this financialization trend?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
And honestly, the answers are complicated.
Right.
On the one hand, financialization can bring benefits.
Okay.
It can increase access to capital for housing development,
Right.
which could lead to more housing supply.
And more supply should mean lower prices, right? That's basic economics.
In theory, yes.
Okay.
But the relationship between supply and price in housing isn't always straightforward.
Okay.
Sometimes increased investment can lead to overbuilding,
Right.
which then results in price drops or even market crashes.
So it's not a simple equation.
It's not,
And we've all seen what happens when those housing bubbles burst.
right?
It can be devastating for people and the economy.
It can.
But you said there are downsides to financialization too, right?
There are. One of the biggest concerns is the commodification of housing.
Okay.
When homes are seen primarily as financial assets,
Yeah.
their social value as places for people to live can get lost in the shuffle.
So it's like forgetting that real people are at the heart of it all.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's not just about numbers on a spreadsheet.
Right.
It's about people being priced out of their own communities, unable to afford a decent place to live.
So it's not just about numbers on a spreadsheet.
Right.
It's about people being priced out of their own communities, unable to afford a decent place to live.
Exactly. And that's something we're seeing play out in cities across the globe.
Yeah.
As more and more capital floods the housing market, it drives up prices often beyond what locals can afford,
Right.
forcing them to move elsewhere.
So financialization can actually worsen affordability problems
It can.
and lead to displacement.
And lead to displacement. It also often leads to more concentrated ownership.
Okay.
Think about those companies buying up tons of houses. They become huge landlords,
Yep.
reducing options for renters and potentially driving up rents.
It sounds like a vicious cycle. Financialization pushes up prices, forces out residents, and concentrates ownership,
Right.
which then fuels even more financialization. It's Pretty bleak.
It can feel that way.
Yeah.
But the good news is that we're not powerless.
Okay.
There are things we can do to counter these negative trends.
Okay, I'm all ears. What are some of the solutions?
Well, one approach is to regulate the flow of capital into housing.
Okay.
Some cities are trying to curb foreign ownership of real estate.
Okay.
Others are imposing taxes on vacant properties to deter speculators from just sitting on empty homes.
So trying to cool down the market
Yeah,
and discourage treating homes purely as investment vehicles.
exactly.
Another key strategy is to boost the supply of affordable housing,
Okay.
either through direct government investment or incentives for private developers to prioritize projects that benefit the community.
So more affordable housing options would help to ease that pressure on prices,
Right.
making it possible for more people to find decent places to live.
Are there any other solutions being explored?
There are. Some communities are exploring alternative models of ownership,
Like?
like community land trusts
Okay.
or cooperative housing.
Okay.
These models aim to decommodify housing,
Yep.
ensuring that it remains affordable and accessible for the long term.
It's encouraging to hear about these different approaches. It sounds like it's going to take a multifaceted effort to address the complex challenges of financialization.
Absolutely. There's no magic bullet.
Mhm.
It requires a combination of policy interventions, community activism, and even shifts in our cultural mindset about how we view and value housing.
Right. There's no one-size-fits-all solution.
There isn't.
What works in one city or country might not work in another?
Exactly. Each community has its own unique challenges and opportunities.
Yeah.
And government policies need to be tailored to those specific contexts.
Okay, we've tackled financialization,
Yeah.
but let's not forget about the process of actually creating new housing.
Right.
It's not all about financing existing properties. It's also about building new ones.
Right. The development process itself.
Yeah.
And let me tell you, it's a marathon, not a sprint,
Yo,
with its own unique set of hurdles and obstacles.
I can imagine.
Hmm.
What are some of the biggest challenges developers face?
Well, it all starts with finding a suitable piece of land.
Okay.
And in densely populated areas that can be like searching for a needle in a haystack,
Right.
competition for land can be fierce, driving up prices to astronomical levels.
So location really rings true for developers too.
Absolutely. And then there are the zoning regulations, which
Yeah.
can dictate everything from building height to parking requirements.
Okay.
These regulations are meant to ensure responsible development,
Right.
but they can also add time, complexity, and cost to a project.
I bet navigating those bureaucratic labyrinths can be a nightmare.
It can be. But once they've secured the land, what's next?
Yeah. What happens then?
Well, then it's all about securing financing for the project.
Right.
As we talked about earlier, developers have a few options: bonds, bank loans, REITs, even going public on the stock market.
Right.
But getting that funding isn't always easy,
Yeah.
especially in a volatile economy or when interest rates are sky high.
Lenders want to be sure they're not taking on too much risk.
They do.
So they scrutinize those development projects very carefully.
They do. And once the financing is sorted, the design and planning phase begins.
Okay.
Architects and engineers draw up detailed plans,
Hmm.
ensuring the project meets all building codes and safety regulations.
So making sure the buildings are structurally sound
Exactly.
and safe for people to live or work in.
It is. And this stage can also involve community engagement.
Oh, okay.
Developers often seek input from residents and local organizations,
Okay.
which can help ensure the project aligns with the community's needs and values.
Getting buy-in from the community can make all the difference. But even with all those pieces in place,
Mm-hmm.
there are still risks during the construction phase.
Right. Cost overruns,
Yeah.
unexpected delays,
Hmm?
unforeseen construction challenges,
Okay.
even accidents or injuries on the site. It's a complex undertaking with a lot of moving parts.
Sounds stressful. So it's not just about sticking to a budget and a timeline.
Right.
It's about managing all those potential curveballs.
Exactly. And once construction is finally complete, the developers have to shift gears and focus on marketing and either leasing or selling those newly built properties.
So they have to find occupants for those shiny new buildings.
They do. And in a competitive market, attracting tenants or buyers requires a smart strategy.
Yeah.
From setting the right prices to highlighting appealing amenities.
Yeah, it sounds like the development process is a real roller coaster ride,
It is.
filled with both challenges and triumphs.
Definitely. It requires a unique blend of vision, financial savvy, and resilience.
Speaking of resilience, I'm reminded of those innovative solutions they're exploring in Africa to overcome the lack of traditional financing options.
Right. It's a great example of how financial engineering can be a force for good.
Yeah.
Remember, financial engineering isn't just about making money. It can also be about finding creative solutions to real-world problems.
That's a great point. So besides those examples in Africa, how else is financial engineering shaping the housing market?
Well, we've already talked about some examples
Yeah.
like mortgage-backed securities and REITs.
Right.
These are financial innovations that have completely transformed how we finance and invest in housing.
It's almost like they've created a whole new financial ecosystem around housing.
They have. And as technology advances and the housing market evolves, we can expect even more creative financial solutions to emerge,
Okay.
hopefully addressing those challenges of affordability and access.
I'm starting to see how all these pieces fit together, but I have to admit it's a lot to wrap my head around.
Housing finance can feel incredibly complex.
It can.
But that's why it's so important to break it down,
Right.
to understand those key moving parts and how they influence each other.
It's not about mastering every single detail. It's
Right.
about seeing the big picture and understanding those connections.
Exactly. And it's about recognizing that the housing market is constantly evolving,
Right.
responding to changes in the economy, technology, and societal needs.
So it's a constant learning process, not a destination.
It is. And it's a journey worth taking because housing is so fundamental to our lives,
Yeah,
our communities, our well-being.
it is. Okay, so we've explored the financialization of housing, the ins and outs of the development process, and the power of financial engineering.
We have.
But what else should we cover in this deep dive?
Well, we can't talk about housing without talking about the role of government. After all, government policies have a huge influence on the housing market,
Yeah.
impacting everything from affordability to development patterns.
It's like the government is a key player in this giant game of housing monopoly.
That's a great analogy. And they've got a variety of policy tools at their disposal,
Yeah.
with zoning regulations being one of the most impactful.
Those zoning rules determine what can be built where, right?
Exactly. They can impact density affordability. Even the overall character of a neighborhood.
Right.
Some cities use zoning to encourage more housing development,
Okay.
while others use it to preserve existing communities or limit growth.
It sounds like a delicate balancing act,
It is.
trying to achieve multiple objectives with these zoning policies.
It is. And then there are policies that directly target affordability,
Okay.
like rent control,
Rent control.
housing subsidies,
Right.
and tax breaks for homeowners.
Rent control is a hot topic in many cities.
It is.
It aims to protect tenants from exorbitant rent hikes.
Right.
But some argue it can discourage new construction and lead to shortages.
It's a complex issue with valid arguments on both sides.
Yeah.
And then there are housing subsidies,
Okay.
which provide direct financial assistance to low-income families struggling to afford housing.
Subsidies seem crucial for ensuring that everyone has a roof over their heads,
Yeah,
especially those most vulnerable to housing insecurity.
they are. And then there are those tax breaks for homeowners,
Okay.
like the mortgage interest deduction.
Which can make homeownership more affordable for some,
Right.
but also contribute to rising house prices,
Right.
making it harder for others to get on the property ladder.
So government policies can have both positive and negative,
They can.
intended and unintended consequences.
That's the tricky part. It's about finding that sweet spot.
Yeah.
Those policies that strike the right balance and create a more equitable and sustainable housing market.
Right.
And that often means considering the long-term impacts, not just short-term gains.
Right. There's no one-size-fits-all solution.
There isn't.
What works in one city or country might not work in another.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Each community has its own unique challenges and opportunities, and government policies need to be tailored to those specific contexts.
Okay, we've talked about financialization development, the role of government.
Mhm.
But I think there's another perspective we shouldn't overlook, the human dimension of housing.
Ah, yes.
Yeah.
It's easy to get caught up in the financial intricacies
Yeah.
and forget that housing is ultimately about people.
It's about creating spaces where people can live, work, raise families, and build communities.
It's about fostering a sense of belonging and creating a society where everyone has the opportunity to thrive.
And it's about recognizing that everyone deserves a safe, affordable, and decent place to call home. It's about seeing housing as a fundamental right, not just a commodity.
Absolutely.
Right.
And that's a powerful shift in perspective. It challenges us to think differently about how we design, finance, and regulate housing.
It does.
It's about aligning those financial goals with social goals,
Right.
ensuring that the housing market serves the needs of people and communities,
Yeah.
not just investors.
Exactly. And it's about recognizing that investing in affordable housing isn't just the right thing to do.
Yeah.
It's also a smart economic decision.
When people have stable, secure housing, it benefits everyone.
Right.
It can improve health outcomes, reduce crime, and create a more productive workforce.
It's like a ripple effect, those positive impacts spreading throughout society.
So how do we bridge that gap between the ideal of housing as a human right and the realities of a market driven by financial motives?
That's the big question. And honestly, there's no easy answer. But I think it starts with challenging the status quo,
Okay.
questioning assumptions, and being willing to explore new and innovative solutions.
Solutions that prioritize people over profit.
Yes,
Solutions that promote equity and inclusion.
absolutely.
Solutions that ensure that everyone has a place to call home.
Well said. And as we conclude this part of our deep dive, I want to encourage our listeners to keep pondering this crucial question. What role can you play in shaping the future of housing?
That's a great question to leave everyone with. It challenges us to think beyond ourselves and consider how we can contribute to a more just and equitable housing system.
It's about recognizing that we all have a stake in this issue, and even small actions can make a difference.
We'll be back shortly for the final part of our deep dive.
Yeah.
See you soon. Welcome back to the final part of our deep dive into housing finance.
It's remarkable how much we've covered already.
We really have.
Yeah.
It feels like we've gone on a journey.
It does.
We started with like those fundamental building blocks, the balance sheet, the concept of leverage.
Really laying that foundation.
Laying the foundation.
Sure.
Exactly. Then we explored that intriguing idea that a mortgage can be viewed as a long call option on your house.
Oh, yeah. That was fun.
I like that part. We even ventured into the world of stock picking strategies, from fundamental analysis to sentiment analysis.
Right. It's all connected.
It's all connected. And of course, we grappled with the complex and often concerning trend of housing financialization.
The elephant in the room.
The elephant in the room. But now as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to bring it back to that fundamental question we posed earlier. Yeah. That question of housing as a human right.
Right. It's easy to get caught up in all the numbers, the financial models, all those market forces.
Easy to lose sight of the people involved.
It is. We can't forget that housing is about people at the end of the day.
It's about creating safe, healthy, and affordable spaces where people can live, raise families.
Absolutely.
Build communities.
It's about that foundation for a good life.
And it's about ensuring that everyone has a place to call home, a foundation from which they can build a life of dignity and opportunity.
Well said. And you know what? That's not just a moral imperative.
What is it?
It's a smart investment in our collective future.
I love that framing.
When people have access to stable housing, it creates a ripple effect.
A ripple effect.
Positive outcomes across society.
Tell me more.
Well, studies have shown that secure housing can lead to improved health outcomes.
Okay.
Increased educational attainment.
Wow.
Higher productivity, and even lower crime rates.
So it's not just about providing shelter. It's about creating a more just and equitable society for everyone.
It's about investing in our communities and in our future.
Exactly. And that's why it's so crucial to find ways to bridge that gap between the ideal of housing as a human right and the realities of the housing market.
Right, because that gap can feel pretty wide sometimes.
It does. Especially when we see people struggling with homelessness, inadequate housing conditions, or the threat of eviction.
It's heartbreaking. And it underscores the urgency of finding solutions.
It does. So where do we even begin to address such a complex challenge?
I think it starts with a shift in our collective mindset.
Okay.
We need to move beyond viewing housing solely as a commodity or an investment.
Right.
And start recognizing its inherent social value.
It's about understanding that housing is not just a private good, but also a public good.
A public good that benefits everyone.
Benefits society as a whole.
Exactly.
And that requires us to think differently about how we design, finance, and regulate housing.
Absolutely. For example, instead of focusing solely on maximizing profits, we need to prioritize policies and practices that promote affordability, accessibility, and sustainability.
Okay, so like what?
We need to explore innovative financing models like those microfinance initiatives we talked about.
Right.
That can expand access to capital for people who are traditionally excluded from lending.
Right, and empower communities to have a say in the process.
Absolutely. give them a voice in shaping the development process,
Yeah.
making sure that new housing projects actually meet their needs.
And reflect their values.
Exactly.
It's about creating a more collaborative and inclusive approach to housing, one that recognizes the interconnectedness of our lives
Absolutely.
and the importance of creating thriving communities.
For everyone.
For all, I love that vision.
It's a vision worth striving for.
But how do we translate those aspirations into concrete actions?
Well, there are a number of organizations and initiatives that are already working on this.
Can you give us some examples?
Sure. There are groups like Habitat for Humanity that provide affordable home ownership opportunities.
Okay.
Organizations like the National Low-Income Housing Coalition, they advocate for policies that expand access to affordable rental housing.
Too important.
Really important work. There are also community land trusts. They take land out of the speculative market and make it permanently affordable.
I like that.
Yeah. And there are innovative financing models like social impact bonds, which leverage private capital to address social challenges.
Including housing.
Including housing.
Wow. It's inspiring to see so many people working to make a difference.
It really is. It reminds us that we're not alone in this fight.
We're not.
There's a growing movement of individuals, organizations, and policymakers who are committed to creating a more just and equitable housing system.
And that gives me hope.
Me too. As we conclude this deep dive, I want to leave our listeners with a final thought.
A thought to ponder.
A question to explore.
Okay.
What will you do to contribute to the realization of housing as a human right?
That's a powerful question. It challenges each of us to go beyond just thinking about this issue.
Right.
But to actually become a part of the solution.
To take action in our own communities.
Exactly. Because ultimately the future of housing is up to all of us.
It is. So thank you for joining us on this deep dive.
It's been an incredible journey. It really has.
It has been a journey of learning, reflection, and hopefully inspiration.
And remember, the conversation doesn't end here.
It doesn't. Keep exploring, keep questioning.
And keep advocating for a world where everyone has a place to call home.
Well said.